Okay, so this is going to be quite a quick video. I just wanted to, I suppose, get my thoughts out there on the budget today and just kind of pick out the key points that I think are quite useful from a, I suppose, financial planning perspective, and hopefully things that will be important to you moving forward. So the first thing, that income tax thresholds have been frozen for a further 3 years. So they were scheduled to be frozen until 2028, and now they're frozen until 2031. So I think this was expected for most people. I think it's a very easy win for the government because it means that they're not necessarily increasing somebody's tax now, but obviously by freezing those rates and thresholds, it means that over the next 5-6 years, people will inevitably pay more tax because their wages will obviously go up in line with inflation or something similar. Whereas those rates are going to be frozen, which means that more people will be paying tax at higher rates. So, as I say, that's one which I think we all expected to happen. The next two are quite similar. So that's to do with dividends income and savings and property income. So the first thing is that dividends are basically a form of income you get if you've got any investments outside of a tax efficient wrapper. So if you've got a general investment account, for example, then you'll more than likely receive dividends from the funds you've got within that general investment account. So if you're a basic rate taxpayer, you'll now be paying 10.75% on that, and that's obviously anything above the dividend allowance. If you're a higher rate taxpayer, you'll be paying 35.75% on those dividends. And this also applies if you are the owner of a limited company. So quite often you'll see that people that own their own limited company will pay themselves in dividends rather than salary because it's historically been quite a bit more tax efficient. But for those individuals, obviously they'll be affected, and that kicks in from next April. The next one, which is kind of linked, is to do with property and savings income. So property income, I mean, if you've got a buy-to-let, for example, you've got rental income coming in from that, this will impact you. So for basic rate taxpayers, higher rate taxpayers, and additional rate taxpayers, this is all going up by 2 percentage points. So effectively, basic rate goes from 20 to 22%, higher rate from 40 to 42%, and additional rate from 45 to 47%. So that's on any rental income and also any savings income. So again, this is above and beyond your personal savings allowance, which it varies depending on your threshold you fall under. So any savings income you've got, so basically any interest that you're earning on money that's not in an ISA, for example, is now going to be taxed at that higher rate. The next is to do with pension contributions, and historically, there's been, I suppose, a benefit to what they call a salary sacrifice arrangement. Now, effectively, what this is it's where you sacrifice part of your pay from your employer, and in return, your employer pays that directly into your pension for you. Now, historically, the big benefits of this have been A, the tax relief you get by sacrificing into your pension, and B, the national insurance relief you get. So what the government have basically proposed, and again, it's worth pointing out, this isn't coming into effect for another 3 and a bit years. So there is a chance this may change in the interim period. But what they're proposing is that there'll be a cap of £2,000 a year on that. So what that means is that any contributions that you're making above that £2,000, you'll still get the tax relief from an income tax perspective. So for example, if you're a high rate taxpayer, you'll still get that 40% income tax relief on that contribution. What you won't get is the national insurance savings. Now, I think there's been a big deal made about this, and I think incorrectly, because a lot of the headlines I've seen have said things like any contributions above £2,000 you'll be taxed on, and quite frankly, that just isn't true, because you're still going to benefit from that income tax relief. It's just that additional amount of national insurance contribution relief that you'll be losing effectively. So in short, it still makes a lot of sense to make pension contributions because they do remain tax efficient. They're just not quite as tax efficient as they were previously. The next one is probably the one that's been in the news the most, both post-budget and pre-budget, is around cash ISAs. Now, what the government have said with cash ISAs is that they're going to limit the contribution amount to £12,000 a year. So historically, this has been £20,000 for about the last 10 years or so. And that's been the ISA allowance regardless of if you use a cash ISA or a stocks and shares ISA. But what the government are saying is that they're going to limit the cash ISA allowance to £12,000. So if you're wanting to use the full £20,000 ISA allowance, you're going to have to put at least £8,000 of that £20,000 into a stocks and shares ISA. Now, it's worth pointing out that this is only applicable for under 65s. So what the government are trying to do with this is not penalise people that are pensioners that are trying to save money. Now, I am not sure I fully understand why they're doing this, because it seems to me that, if you're of pension age or you're retired, you're not really going to be needing to save money, because the whole point is you've done this before this point. So this is a bit of an odd one for me. I mean, I see what they're trying to do with, limiting the cash ISAs and in hopes that people will start putting that money instead into stocks and shares ISAs. But, people aren't going to change their behaviour. If you're risk averse, you're not suddenly going to go, oh, great, because you're restricting the cash ISA allowance, I'm going to now invest in stocks and shares. I just don't see that happening. But yeah, it remains to be seen. The last one that I'm going to cover is on what was previously called mansion tax, which is now being referred to more as property tax. So with this, what they're saying is that if you've got a property worth over £2 million, you're effectively going to pay a council tax surcharge. Now, the amount's going to differ depending on the actual amount the property's worth. But in simple terms, if you've got a property worth more than £2 million, you're going to pay somewhere between £2,500 to £7,500 extra each year through your council tax. Now, the final details of this are kind of, they're still a bit up in the air. And again, this is another one that doesn't come into effect for another 2 and a bit years. So again, there is subject to change with all of this. But yeah, again, an interesting one. Again, I see what they're trying to do in that, for them, it's quite a quick win and an easy win that they can raise a bit more tax from those individuals that have got those properties. The idea being that, if you've got a £2 million house, an extra 2.5 to £5,000 a year is not going to be the end of the world. But in terms of, I think there's some sort of idea around the fact that these individuals might end up selling those properties to I suppose, avoid paying that tax, and therefore trying to, I suppose, increase or give a bit more movement in the property market. I just don't see that happening. But again, all of this remains to be seen as to how effective it is. But yeah, anyway, as I say, my thoughts on today's budget. Hope you got some value from that. Again, a lot of this is subject to change, but I'm kind of just reacting to what's come out today. So yeah, hopefully you found that useful.